How did Native Americans sleep outside on freezing nights? Their methods will shock you and make you look at Native Americans in a different light. Imagine a night in a snow-covered forest where the temperature drops to minus 40 degrees. In such conditions, a modern person without special equipment would not survive even a few hours. However, the indigenous peoples of North America not only survived for centuries, but also slept comfortably under the open sky in the most severe frosts. Their secret was not supernatural abilities, but a deep understanding of the laws of nature. They knew how to turn snow, branches, and stones into an effective heating system. They mastered the art that allowed them to make the icy desert their home. Watch this video to the end, and you will learn how just a few fir branches and the wisdom of generations turn the frozen ground into a warm bed, and why the main enemy of a freezing person is not the air, but what lies beneath it. What if I told you that your main enemy on a freezing night is not the frosty air, but the ground you are lying on? The human body loses heat much faster when in contact with solid objects than with air. This process is called contact heat transfer. Lying directly on snow or frozen ground is like leaning against a huge piece of ice. The ground will continuously draw heat from your body until it is completely cold. No fur blanket can save you from this invisible enemy.
Even the thickest fur will fail without insulation.
Therefore, the first and foremost task was not to cover yourself from above, but to insulate yourself from below. The indigenous people understood this principle intuitively. Their entire system of shelter was built around creating a barrier between the body and the cold ground. This barrier had to be thick and, most importantly, contain a lot of air. It is air trapped in immovable pockets that is the best natural insulator. The task was to create such an air layer from materials at hand. Therefore, when preparing for bed, the Indian first looked not at the sky, but at his feet. He was looking for materials to build his bed. Whether he would wake up in the morning or not depended on the quality of this insulating pillow.
The spruce branches are a great insulator.
The whole process was a carefully calibrated ceremony, where every step was crucial. A mistake in preparing the base could negate all other efforts. This was fundamental knowledge, the basis of survival. They knew that the thickness of the insulation was crucial. The layer had to be dense enough not to collapse under the weight of the body and to retain air pockets. Therefore, preparing the bed took a considerable amount of time.
It's all about trapping the air to keep the warmth in.
All the subsequent tricks, furs, fire, hot stones, only worked if the main task was accomplished. Insulation from the ground was the alpha and omega of a comfortable night's sleep in the cold. This was the first and most important lesson that every young man learned. Modern tourists use expensive inflatable or polyurethane foam mats for this purpose. Native Americans created their mats from what the forest provided them, and often their natural technologies were not inferior to modern ones. What modern tourist technologies do you think solve the same problem that Native Americans solved with the help of nature? Share your thoughts in the comments. Want to know the secret that turns snow into a feather bed? Preparing a place to sleep began with clearing the area down to the ground. The snow was pushed aside to form a protective wall that provided additional protection from the wind. The first rough layer was laid on the bare frozen ground. This could be thick branches or even small logs. Their task was to create a base and raise the entire structure above the ground, ensuring the largest air gap possible. Then the creation of the main insulating layer began. Coniferous tree branches, spruce or fir, were ideal for this. Their thick needles trapped air perfectly and created a resilient, springy base. The branches were laid very tightly in layers, like tiles on a roof. The lower layers consisted of large branches, the upper ones of smaller and fluffier ones. The result was a mattress at least 20-30 centimeters thick. On top of the coniferous base, the next layer was poured, made of dry materials. These could be dry leaves, grass, or moss, which were collected in advance. This layer filled the remaining voids and made the bed softer.
The air trapped between the spruce needles and moss.
This multi-layered construction was incredibly effective. Air was trapped between the logs and the thick pine needles and among the dry leaves. Body heat did not escape into the ground but was reflected back. When a person lay down on such a feather bed, it only crumpled slightly under their weight. The elastic fir branches prevented it from completely flattening, preserving the precious air layer. Sleeping on such a bed was soft and warm. This method was universal and was used both in the forests of the Northeast and in the mountains of the West. Only the available materials changed, but the principle itself remained the same. Insulation from below is the key to everything. The tribes of the Great Plains, who lived in steppes where there were few trees, used thick layers of dry grass for this purpose. They created real nests in which one could shelter from the wind and cold. But even the best insulation from below is useless without the right blanket. Ready to find out which skins were most prized and why beaver fur was better than bear fur for sleeping? I will reveal the most closely guarded secret of survival. Not all furs are the same. Indigenous peoples had a thorough understanding of the properties of different animal skins. Choosing fur for bedding was a real science on which comfort depended. The absolute king of furs on the Great Plains was the bison hide. Huge, heavy, and incredibly warm, it could serve as both a mattress and a blanket for the whole family. Winter bison fur with a thick undercoat was the best protection against the cold. In forest regions, deer and moose skins were highly prized. Their hair is hollow inside, which creates additional air insulation. 2 or 3 such skins sewn together made an excellent sleeping bag.
This fur, it keeps you warm.
However, softer furs were preferred for direct contact with the body. Beaver or otter skins were considered the gold standard. Their incredibly thick and short undercoat was so dense that it was practically waterproof and excellent at retaining heat. Interestingly, bear skins, despite their apparent warmth, were less valued. Their fur was coarse and not as thick as that of beavers. It was well suited for making outerwear, but was not the best choice for bedding. To create large sleeping blankets, many small skins were often sewn together. Rabbit skin blankets were especially prized. They were surprisingly light and warm, although not as durable as bison skins. The process of tanning hides was a separate art, which women mastered to perfection. The hide was carefully cleaned, kneaded, and treated with natural substances to make it soft and elastic. A poorly tanned hide became stiff and uncomfortable in the cold. People usually slept wrapped in furs with their heads inside. The warm air they exhaled remained inside the cocoon, providing additional warmth. This allowed them to breathe warm air instead of icy air. Furs served not only as bedding, but also as a kind of currency. A high-quality bison robe or beaver cape was a sign of the wealth and skill of its owners. It was a vital resource that was treated with great respect. Thus, the Native American blanket was not just a skin, but a high-tech product. It was the result of a deep knowledge of nature and centuries of experience. Properly selected and processed furs were the key to a warm and safe night. What I am about to show you was not just a fire, but a real heating device under the open sky. Indigenous peoples never lit a fire just for the sake of it. The type of fire always corresponded to the task at hand, and special, slow-burning structures were used for nighttime heating. The most famous was the long fire, or nodia, which was often used by hunters in the forest. For this, 2 dry logs as tall as a person were selected. They were stacked on top of each other, with small chips laid between them for draft. This structure did not burn with a bright flame, but smoldered slowly throughout the night. The heat from it did not rise upward, but spread sideways, evenly warming the sleeping person. A properly stacked nodia could smolder for 6 to 8 hours without the need to add wood. Another popular type was the star-shaped fire. Several thick logs were placed with their ends in the center, like the rays of a star. As they burned, they were simply moved closer to the center, which allowed for economical use of fuel. A very important element was the heat reflector. On the side opposite the fire, a wall was built out of logs, stones, or even dense snow. This wall reflected the heat from the fire back onto the sleeper, creating a warm and cozy niche. The sleeping area was located between the fire and the reflector. The person received heat from the front, from the fire, and from the back, from the heated wall. It was a simple but incredibly effective heating system. Fuel for the night fire was prepared in advance and in large quantities. Preference was given to dry logs of hardwood. They burned longer and produced more coals.
And that, my dear, is how the moon got its glow.
Great attention was paid to safety. The area around the fire was carefully cleared of dry grass and leaves. At night, someone always kept watch over the fire to make sure it did not go out and cause a fire. The fire was not only a source of heat, but also a psychological center. Its steady burning and crackling embers created a feeling of safety and comfort. It drove away not only the cold, but also nighttime fears. In the next chapter, you will learn how they used the heat of the fire even when they were far away from it, and how an ordinary stone was turned into a personal heating pad. The warmth from the fire could not only be felt from a distance, but also literally put in bed with you. To do this, Native Americans used a simple but ingenious technology: hot stones. It was a kind of heat accumulator that worked all night long. Not all stones were suitable for this purpose. They chose smooth, dense cobblestones without cracks, preferably from hard rock. They tried not to use stones found near the river, as there could be moisture in their pores, which could cause the stone to crack when heated.
Do you see the difference between the dry stone and the river stone?
Wow.
The stones were placed directly in the fire or next to it and heated for several hours. They had to be well heated, but not red hot. A stone that was too hot could burn through the fur and cause burns. When the stones were hot enough, they were carefully removed from the fire with sticks. Hot stones were never picked up with bare hands. This was one of the first things young people were taught. Then each stone was wrapped in several layers of cloth or a piece of thick leather. This was done so that the heat would be released slowly and evenly. Such wrapping also protected against accidental burns.
You want to make sure the hide is completely hidden underneath the woven cloth.
The prepared warmers were laid out inside the sleeping area. 1 or 2 stones were placed at the feet, and another in the lumbar region. They preheated the bed, making it warm and cozy even before a person lay down in it. During the night, the stones slowly released the accumulated heat, maintaining a comfortable temperature. This was especially important in the coldest hours before dawn, when the fire might have already burned out. The heat from the stones warmed people from the inside. This method was so effective that it was used almost everywhere. It did not require any complicated devices, only stones, fire, and knowledge. It was a simple and reliable way to provide an additional source of heat. In the morning, the cooled stones could be put back into the fire. This created a continuous heating cycle. It was one of many little tricks that, taken together, made it possible to survive in the harshest conditions. The use of hot stones is a striking example of how indigenous peoples used the fundamental laws of physics. They intuitively understood what heat capacity was and applied this knowledge in practice. It was true survival engineering. Are you ready for the shocking truth about man's best friend in the North? Dogs in Native American cultures were not just pets. They were versatile helpers, hunting partners, guards, and, importantly, living hot water bottles. Many tribes, especially in subarctic regions, kept large numbers of dogs. These were strong, hardy animals with thick fur, perfectly adapted to the cold climate. They were an integral part of the community. On cold nights, dogs often slept with people. They were taken into teepees, wigwams, or simply laid down next to them in the open air. Several dogs curled up next to a person could replace the warmest blanket. Dogs have a higher body temperature than humans and give off a lot of heat. Sleeping humans and dogs kept each other warm, creating a single warm zone. It was a mutually beneficial partnership based on centuries-old friendship. The dogs were placed on the back or at the feet. They served as a living barrier, protecting against wind and cold. Their warmth helped conserve precious energy and ensured a peaceful sleep. This practice was especially common among lone hunters or warriors on the march. When it was not possible to build a large fire or the bed was not warm enough, faithful dogs became the only source of additional heat. Their presence saved people from freezing. Such close proximity was completely natural. Dogs were considered members of the family, and sleeping together only strengthened this bond. It was not just a utilitarian function, but part of a deep relationship between humans and animals. Dogs also served as alarms. Their keen hearing could detect approaching danger long before humans could. Sleeping next to them was not only warm, but also safer. A good dog was extremely valuable. It was fed and cared for, and it responded with loyalty and a willingness to serve humans. In the harsh conditions of the North, this bond was essential for the survival of both. But what if there was no firewood or dogs and the warrior was left alone in the cold? In the next chapter, we will look at how clothing itself became a sleeping bag. The clothing of indigenous peoples was not just an outfit, but a multifunctional protection system. It was designed to provide comfort both in motion and at rest. The principle of layering, which is advertised today by manufacturers of tourist clothing, has been known to them for centuries. The bottom layer of clothing was made of thin, soft suede, such as deerskin. It was pleasant to the touch. Wick. The outer layer of clothing was two-layered. The inner layer was made with the fur against the body, and the outer layer with the fur facing outwards. This design created a maximum number of air pockets and effectively retained heat. The cut of the clothing was also well thought out. Parkas and capes were spacious enough to allow for several layers of clothing underneath. At the same time, they had hoods and ties that allowed them to be tightly closed against the wind. Clothes were not taken off for sleep, but only loosened slightly. They became part of the overall sleeping system. A person would lie down in their forest bed, cover themselves with furs, and their own clothes would serve as an additional insulating layer. Special attention was paid to protecting the feet. Moccasins were stuffed with dry grass or moss at night. This not only insulated them, but also absorbed moisture that had accumulated during the day, allowing the feet to remain dry. Hands and head were also carefully protected. Fur mittens and hats or hoods were essential elements of winter clothing. Heat loss through the extremities and head occurs very quickly. The most important rule was to keep clothes dry. If clothes got wet, they were immediately dried by the fire. Wet clothes in the cold are a direct path to hypothermia. Warriors on campaign who could not carry many furs with them slept directly in their clothes. They would squat down, cover themselves with a cloak over their heads, and doze off in this position. This posture minimized contact with the cold ground and retained heat. Thus, clothing was not just protection from the cold during the day, it was an integral part of their overnight gear, a personal sleeping bag that was always with them. Choosing the right place to sleep was no less important than all the other preparations. An experienced person could determine the safest and warmest place at a glance. It was the art of reading the landscape. The main enemy, besides the cold, was the wind. It blows away the warm layer of air around the body and increases heat loss many times over. Therefore, the first priority was to find natural shelter from the wind. A dense group of coniferous trees was considered the ideal place. Their low-hanging branches created a thick curtain that effectively blocked the wind and trapped snow. It was always quieter and warmer under the crowns of fir trees than in open areas. The features of the terrain were also used for shelter. They spent the night on the leeward side of a hill, in shallow ravines, or at the base of rocky outcrops. Any natural obstacle in the path of the wind became an ally.
This angle, when the sun hits the snow, creates a reflecting surface.
Sometimes they had to build their own shelter. The simplest was a reflective wall made of snow or branches, which we have already mentioned. It protected from the wind and reflected the heat of the fire. In deep snow, it was possible to dig a snow pit or trench. Paradoxically, snow is a good insulator. In a depression protected from the wind, the temperature was always a few degrees higher than on the surface. When choosing a place, the availability of resources was also taken into account. There had to be a source of dry fuel for the fire nearby. Ideally, these were dry, fallen trees that did not need to be cut down. They avoided spending the night at the bottom of deep valleys and ravines. Cold air flows there, and it is always coldest at night. Preference was given to slopes slightly above the bottom. Experienced people also avoided lone trees during snowstorms. They could cause injury if branches fell under the weight of snow. Safety always came first. Choosing a location was a complex equation with many variables. Wind direction, terrain, fuel availability, and overall safety had to be considered. This knowledge was as important as the ability to build a fire. In harsh conditions, it was much more difficult to survive alone than in a group. The principle of collectivism also applied to the organization of sleeping arrangements. Sleeping together was not only a social norm, but also an effective way to conserve heat.
And that is how the brave wolf found his way home, guided by the stars.
The physics of this process is simple. Several bodies close together lose heat more slowly than one. They create a common warm zone and keep each other warm. In a large teepee or wigwam, families slept together, huddled close to each other. A fire burned in the center of the dwelling, and people sat around it like the rays of a star. This was the optimal arrangement for even heat distribution. Huge bison robes were often used for sleeping, covering the entire family. Under such a common blanket, the heat from several people was retained. This was much more effective than each person covering themselves separately. The most vulnerable members of the community were always placed in the warmest spot. This was usually in the center of the group, between adults. This way, they were protected from the cold on all sides. Even small hunting or military groups used this principle. Warriors lay side by side, covered with shared cloaks. This allowed them to rest more effectively and conserve their strength for the next day. Sleeping together also provided greater security. While some slept, others could keep watch and monitor the fire and the surrounding environment. Responsibility for the group's survival was shared. This method demonstrates the deep social bonds within communities. Survival was seen not as an individual task, but as a collective one. People relied on each other for everything. Unlike European culture, with its emphasis on personal space, physical closeness was the norm among indigenous peoples. It was dictated not only by cultural traditions, but also by harsh necessity. It was another tool for adapting to the environment. Thus, the community itself was a source of warmth. Unity and mutual aid were as important to survival as fur or fire. They warmed not only bodies, but also souls. We have described many material techniques that allowed indigenous peoples to sleep in the cold. However, there was another, invisible, but perhaps the most important layer of protection. These were physiological adaptation and deep knowledge passed down from generation to generation. People who had spent their entire lives in harsh climates were physiologically adapted to the cold. Their bodies reacted differently to low temperatures. Their metabolism and circulatory system were more efficient at conserving heat. This acclimatization was the result of natural selection over hundreds of generations. Their bodies were tuned to survive in conditions that seem extreme to us. This was their innate advantage. Equally important was their psychological attitude. They did not perceive the cold as an enemy or something terrible. It was simply part of their world, a condition to which they had to adapt. Fear and panic caused the body to lose heat much faster. Calmness and confidence, on the contrary, helped the body mobilize its internal resources. Their mental fortitude was a powerful weapon against the cold. Their main asset, however, was knowledge. Every aspect of survival, from choosing wood for a fire to tanning hides, was part of a vast system of knowledge. This system had been honed and tested in practice for centuries. This knowledge was not recorded in books. It was passed down orally from older to younger generations, through stories, songs, and personal example. From an early age, children absorbed this science of survival by observing adults. They learned to recognize tracks in the snow, determine the weather by the color of the sky, and find food in medicinal plants. By the time they reached adulthood, they had encyclopedic knowledge of their land. The forest was not a strange and hostile place for them.
Look, a squirrel!
What do you see?
Therefore, when we talk about the survival of indigenous peoples, we are not just talking about a set of tricks. We are talking about a holistic worldview, about a harmonious fusion with nature. They did not fight it, but were part of it. Their comfort in the cold is the result of a perfect combination of technology, physiology, and profound knowledge. It was the art of living in its purest form, a lesson that still inspires admiration today. We see that the Native Americans' overnight stay in the bitter cold was not an act of desperation, but a well-thought-out and well-organized process. Behind the apparent simplicity lay a complex system in which each element played its part. Insulation from the ground, multi-layered furs, clever fire, and hot stones were all part of a unified strategy. These methods are a vivid testament to how a deep understanding of nature can replace even the most modern technologies. They prove that the main tools for human survival have always been and remain the mind, observation, and the experience accumulated by ancestors. This story is not about fighting the cold, but about living in harmony with it. What other aspects of the life and survival of indigenous peoples would you be interested in seeing in future videos? Suggest your topics in the comments and we will try to cover them. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on new research into the wisdom of the past.